Give your little one the gift of reading with a copy of Tai the Dreamer, a delightful story of a lovable, brilliant daddy's girl and her cuddly, adorable cat. Tai the Dreamer teaches kids to achieve ambitious dreams, supported by loving fathers and strong communities. Available online at itascabooks.com. That's ITASCA books.com. Tai the Dreamer is a perfect gift. Dream big with Tai the Dreamer.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at OneQ Leadership. We're joined today by Kyle Adams. Kyle is the Deputy Director of Athletics at Delaware State. Greetings, Kyle. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ty. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your platform. Love the work that you're doing.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you on. You've been there for almost 2 years. Your background is interesting. Former head women's basketball coach. You have a book called Discarding the Mask. You do a podcast. You do a lot of extracurricular things that I saw on your bio. One thing I noticed about your bio, though, is there's 2 lines about what you do at Delaware State, right? And then there's all these other things that you do for the community, just college athletics community, just for people in general. But specifically to start off, I want to know how you would define your role there at Delaware State in terms of what you do for student athletes, what you do to help the athletic director to be successful, and the school in general.
So first, I listened to your interview with now Dr. Alicia Shields-Gatson.
Dr. Alicia
Congratulations.
Shields-Gatson. Yep.
She recently completed her requirements to receive her doctorate, so we're really excited about that. I really view my role at Delaware State as supporting Dr. Gatson's leadership in a multitude of ways. We have over 460 student athletes. As a coach, I was always very student-centered, and I think that I had a keen insight young as a coach to really being in tune to the needs of student athletes and what are some of their different concerns and their needs and the nurturing that they require. So I get an opportunity to engage with all of our student athletes just based around some of the different challenges they may have in becoming acclimated to the university environment. I'm heavily involved with our Holistic Wellness Center. Under Dr. Gatson's leadership, we've been able to secure a grant from the NCAA, which has allowed us to build a holistic wellness center that our student athletes really love, where they can kind of get some time to get away from everybody else. And they're able to utilize that space and kind of detach from all the rigors that being a student athlete in Division I athletics kind of demands from you. So that's one of the things. I'm heavily involved with our SAC. We actually have this year the president of the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, SAC, is a young man named Charles Brown, who plays on our football team. So we've been heavily involved with really starting to shine some light from a legislative standpoint on how this transfer portal, NIL, this current ecosystem, how it impacts HBCUs. And our student athletes have been on the front line and really connecting with some of the legislators in our state, as well as different legislators nationally. So that's been something that we've been involved in. One of the things that excites me amongst my duties is also working to help develop our coaches. Coaching I've always felt like that was my ministry. As I've transitioned into administration, I still look at a lot of what I do and what we do, especially with Dr. Gatson, who was also a very successful coach. We kind of see things. We're kind of in tune to what some of the things our coaches are dealing with. So I do a lot to provide resources for our coaches to make sure that they're growing and developing. Ty, you see how the landscape of college athletics is changing. Coaches have to change and adapt. And so we're really serious about having our coaches continue to grow and develop and being able to meet the needs of this new generation of student athlete, but also how to build a program and a culture in this new landscape.
Let's say you were at an event with a bunch of people who had no idea, like they were familiar with college sports, but they didn't really know how it works, right? And you had to capture your role there at Delaware State in a sentence or two. What would you say that your responsibility or role is there at Delaware State?
On my whiteboard, the first thing I have on my whiteboard is I'm the CEO. I'm the chief energy officer of our department.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, in supporting Dr. Gatson's leadership, I'm tasked with having a pulse of our department and what's going on with our staff, what's going on with our coaches, what's going on with our student athletes. So in essence, I still get to coach, I get to inspire, I get to motivate, I get to mobilize, I get to encourage not just our student athletes, but our coaches, our senior staff, our admin staff, just to get them to recognize and embrace the unique opportunity that we have to work in college athletics, but to also work at one of these historic institutions.
Which is excellent. So, Chief Energy Officer, motivate, inspire, and develop people within the athletics department there at Delaware State. Tell me, do you have a formalized process of the development of motivation? Are you meeting regularly with coaches? Is there a education process with student athletes? Tell me, have you in 2 years, have you been able to formalize that process so there's actually a process? Is it formalized in any way, or is this is your personality? Get to know people and help them to be the best they possibly can.
I think it's multifaceted. So one, It's my personality. I really strive to be loving and engaging with everybody that I come in contact with. And I think what's unique about being at an HBCU is you're not just that for the coaches. You're not just that for the student athletes. I get an opportunity to be that with everybody that I see walking across campus. And that excites me. So I would say that a lot of that is kind of just my personality, but it's also the pedagogy in which Dr. Gatson wants our department to operate in. We want to stand out and we want to be recognized for how we love up on our student athletes, but also our staff and our coaches. But from a formalized standpoint, we meet with the coaches once a month. And we actually just met our last Wednesday, and we were talking a great deal about what our team cultures look like, right? And really having some real conversations. I'm a huge reader. As a coach, I utilized a lot of Jeff Jansen's team building resources. There's a book entitled How to Build and Sustain Championship Cultures. And it gives you 8 cultures, right? And it could be a combative culture. It could be a country club culture. But us really starting to have conversation about what our team cultures look like, good, bad, or indifferent. But how do we get to that championship culture? So we do a lot of team. Like as a coach, I was always someone who did team building and did confidence circles and did different exercises. So I've kind of helped to shift that into how I work with our coaches and our staff in the department. So we do a lot of that, and then we share different resources through the Teams app where we're sharing quotes, we're sharing reading materials. I've always believed that if we as coaches and leaders are not improving, the people that we're leading can't improve. So that's been very central to how we've strived to build and elevate the department here at Delaware State.
So what if a lot of it is inherent to your personality, right? What does Dr. Shields Gatson, what does she evaluate you on when it's time to sit down and talk about, where you're going in your career, or where you're going within Delaware State, et cetera, et cetera?
Great question. A lot of it is based around the programming that we're able to bring in.
Okay.
We've been able to bring some different resources into the university and into the department. One being Athlete Talk. Athlete Talk is an application, a mental wellness application specific to student athletes. So not just having access to the app, the founder of Athlete Talk is a man named Dr. Emmett Lee Gill. And we've been able to have Dr. Gill come in and do a lot of work with not just our student athletes when they're having issues from a team building standpoint or individual wellness standpoint, but also with our coaches. So just in recognizing, again, how the landscape is shifting, it's not just the student athletes that are dealing with challenges, right? Our coaches are dealing with a changing ecosystem as well, and they need resources and support. We've also had different issues on campus around assault and really helping to start the conversation about how athletes can be on the front line of being change agents on a college campus. So we've been able to attract, some different resources. A gentleman named Tracy Jones has an organization called the Pawn Lab, where we've had them come on campus and where we can have some really unique conversations with our student athletes about what they're seeing on campus, what they're seeing in the community, but how they can help to change and engage that. So if you were to ask what Dr. Gadsden evaluates me on, it's more along the programming, how we're developing our staff, how we're expanding on our programs. We're also looking to add women's wrestling, as well as looking at the possibility of adding women's flag football in the coming years. So expanding our sports offerings, but also, again, in how I support the mission and vision that she has for our department of building champions, scholars, and citizens.
Are you over, are you tasked with analyzing those sports to see if they fit with Delaware State? Is that your responsibility?
To an extent, I'm involved with her and the rest of our admin team. We all, as senior level administrators in the department, have sport oversight. As it pertains to women's wrestling, I've been heavily involved with Jahi Jones, who's the director of HBCU Wrestling. We've had them to campus. We've also hosted a wrestling clinic for girls to really start to generate some buzz around, Delaware is a state that has a huge wrestling imprint. And so for us we had close to 80 young ladies representing 9 states on our campus, high school student athletes who were interested in women's wrestling was huge. So to answer your question, yes, I'm involved, but a lot of that oversight is we do as a group.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Let's talk about all the other things in your bio, right? Like I mentioned, the first 2 sentences were about Delaware State, but everything else was about all the other things you do around the community. First, I want to get into background a little bit because it seems like your background heavily influences what you do now, right? I mean, with most of us, but specifically, like you coach basketball, you were a men's coach for a long time. Then you got an opportunity to be the head women's basketball coach there at Cheney, which is also where you went to school. And I imagine being an assistant coach if you're not at these big schools, there's probably a bunch of other things you also do on campus. So talk to me about how that molded you in terms of being an assistant coach, but also having your hand in different parts of campus, right? That I imagine supplemented income, but also kind of trained you on your thought process that you use now in a leadership role.
So I've coached at every level of college athletics. I coached junior college. I coached NEI. I coached Division 1, 2, and 3. And in those various levels, those aren't always full-time jobs. So, I always, as a coach, I always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, and that I I didn't come from a great playing pedigree or a great coaching tree. So I knew that when I wanted to become a coach, that I had to outwork people. And used to do, I used to be really intentional at looking at places that I wanted to coach who may not have a full-time coaching position, but may have had some other area of interest that I may have worked in. I worked in mental health when I was an undergrad. I got an opportunity when I was working on my graduate degree at an NAIA school in Ohio, the University of Rio Grande, where I got to run a residence hall. And I got to be the director of multicultural student affairs in addition to coaching. So I think that having those type of experiences and getting to see the whole gambit of student affairs and student life really gave me a different sensitivity and helped me to really shape a more student-centered pedagogy when it came to being a basketball coach. I think sometimes in academia, professors can look at coaches like they just roll balls out, and they are not concerned with other things that are going on with young people. And I always wanted to kind of break that down and let people in academia see, we're as concerned about them achieving and doing in the holistic growth of these young people, not just how they were able to dribble a basketball or whatever ball it may be. So I think those experiences really gave me a unique pedagogy in how I wanted to run a program when I got my opportunity to lead a program. So that was huge for me.
Right. So then you got an opportunity, right? Head women's basketball coach at Cheney. You come into a leadership role. You got all these ideas about what you want to implement and what you've seen, but tell me about the reality when you became a head coach.
Yeah, I think you have all these ideas, but I think what was a blessing for me is that I got an opportunity to institute a lot of my thoughts and ideas in a place that I was very familiar with.
Right.
And I knew some of the I won't say obstacles, I knew the opportunities where we could grow and really provide something different for the student athletes that they hadn't had. For me, I was 2 years as an assistant at Cheney before I became the head women's basketball coach there. So I had an opportunity to kind of watch some things and see some places where we could make improvements and grow. But I think the biggest thing for me was around providing those young women with a great experience, regardless if we won, if we lost, that they felt connected to a unique culture and they were connected with their heritage. It was very important to me to let them know about not just what we represented as the first HBCU in the country, but what the history of that basketball program with those women playing in the first Division I national championship game. Cheney women's programs over the last 20 years have fallen on some hard times. So it was important to me to let them know this is what you come from. And we need to connect you with those women and showing them film and letting them see that this can be done. It's been done before and you're connected to this. And I think it gave them a great deal of pride and intent as we were moving forward to build that basketball program. And I recognize it wasn't just me doing it. It was us doing this together. It was shared ownership and the development and growth of this basketball program, to how we traveled, to how we conducted basketball camps, to how we worked in the community. We always recognized that was a representation of the program that we were building. And it wasn't just my idea, it was them wanting to help build this and do this for the school as well.
Right. And it sounds like this was something close to heart in terms of a passion for it. And what was the catalyst to make the jump away from coaching into administration?
I think that Dr. Alicia Shields Gadsden.
Okay. Yeah, got recruited, huh?
What what's unique is I used to coach here. And I coached here for a year. When I left Cheney, I went to North Carolina Central, left North Carolina Central, and took an opportunity to be an assistant women's basketball coach here at Delaware State. And I had interactions at the time. Dr. Gatson was the SWA and deputy athletic director. So I had some interactions with her. But you never know how people view you and watch you. Because when she ascended to the director of athletics here, I reached out to her about a position at another school. And she basically said, hey, I'll make the call for you. I'll be honored to. But what would you think about coming and working with me here? And I was very humbled by, that she would consider me as someone to be a part of her leadership team, and in that role. So I think I always as a coach looked at a program as a business, and I looked at it from a CEO mindset. It wasn't just it's how we're going into the community. It's how we're engaging with these businesses and sponsors. Like I always had a different lens as it pertained to coaching and what coaches needed to be. So I think that was somewhat of a natural progression for me to kind of step into this role in athletic administration.
So the separation, I talked a lot about athlete transition, right? Understanding who you are versus what you do. And to me, there's two professions where it's really hard to separate who you are versus what you do. And you really don't even know if you want to, right? Coaching and teaching. You know what I mean? It's hard to separate who you are as a coach versus who you are as a person versus what you do as a coach. They're kind of interrelated. Teachers too. So I wonder about the separation from coaching. Like, was that, you said you saw a natural evolution of leadership in terms of administration and those things, but was that a hard transition? I mean, I guess Dr. Gatson made it easy in terms of her recruiting you, but stepping away from the girls or the guys, stepping away from the games, that kind of thing. Tell me about that aspect of it.
I think it was, first I still feel like I'm still coaching.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Based on the things you said. Yeah.
Right. So I still get an opportunity to impact young people. Do I miss being on the floor? I do. I miss practice. I miss teaching. I miss teaching kids how to properly make a post entry or how to sit in a defensive stance. And I miss building connected groups in that way that go out and compete. But I still feel like that I'm connected to providing great experiences for student athletes, which was always at the core of my mission as a coach. I see, as you share, I see a lot of coaches who step away and start to deal with levels of identity foreclosure where, that's coaching is what you've always been called, right? And when you're not connected to that title, you can start to question your self-worth. And I don't know, I think, as you've shared, the fact that I've been able to do some other things in and around coaching has helped me to not carry that, to see myself as something more than a coach. And I think, Ty, that's one of the things that why I've done some different things, because I think coaches need to see themselves as more and being able to do other things and being able to see themselves as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as business people. I think that's important because coaching, most of us who coach will leave coaching not on our terms. And how do you take that experience? How do you take that expertise? How do you take your unique philosophy and pedagogy and craft something more? Because we're ultimately moving people, right? We're connecting people. We're moving them. We're getting them to go to collaborate. And I think those are skills that transcend the basketball court or the field. And how are you able to continue to move people in that way? So I think for me, that's been why I have an experience.
Yeah, which is excellent because you're coaching the staff now and still dealing with student athletes, all those types of things. I want to talk about a couple things here. You have a podcast, right? It's Bigger Than the Ball. Tell me about that. That looks to me, when I look at it, it looks like it's a podcast, but it also looks like it's a bit more than just a podcast, right? It almost like that's your platform in general in terms of a lot of things you do. Tell us about that. It's Bigger Than the Ball.
It's bigger than the ball. So as I shared, I felt like I don't want to say I was unique, but I always felt like I was a bit different in what I felt about coaching and what young people should get from coaching, right? What is the byproduct? What is the end result? Regardless if you're the best player on the team or you're the last person on the bench. What are you instilled with? What are you equipped with to go out in this world and live a meaningful life and live a life of service? How are you able to give it back? So I always looked at that in the lens of it being bigger than the ball. The podcast was, of course, one entity and wanting to share the stories and unique journeys of people who are committed to elevating young people and to helping to advance them. So in that, the podcast, I also wanted to build it out as a business. So I built an LLC. It's Bigger Than the Ball LLC, where I've had an opportunity to go in and do work with coaching staffs and really spend time with them, watch their practices, watch their staff meetings, really connect with them and find out some different ways. Where do they feel like their student athletes are not connecting? And really come in and do different exercises to help build that connection that helps people move to the successful outcomes that that we all want with our teams and our programs. So I've been able to do some different workshops with the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. I spoke last year at the Philadelphia Coaches Conference on establishing a coaching pedagogy, right? What does that look like? Really starting to dedicate thought as a coach as to what are the learning outcomes you want to come from this coaching young people. So I've been able to do a lot in that realm, from speaking and workshops. I'm excited about it.
Right. Excellent. So it's a platform to do basically what you do, right? Because it sounds like you're doing the same thing you do at Delaware State. Everything is like, let me continue to coach people, right? And help people to understand how they can be successful. Talk to us a little bit about the book, Discarding the Mask, the soul sacrifices of a coach.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ty. I started writing that book when I was coaching at Delaware State. I've coached at over 9 institutions. I've coached at 9 institutions. I've coached at 5 different HBCUs. HBCUs are really, in my heart. So to have an opportunity to coach at different ones. I've coached in the Deep South. I've coached in North Carolina Central, which is what could be considered the Mid-Atlantic, Mid-South. And then I've coached at Lincoln and Cheney up in the North. So I think just having those opportunities really has shaped me, and I haven't been successful all the time. Like we talk about our successes a lot, but I don't think enough of us share our frailties and vulnerabilities and mistakes that we make, right? Everybody loves to read the book about the coach that won 500 games. But I think in our journeys, and especially as we look to connect with young people, we've got to be willing to share when things didn't go well. And when we may have made mistakes. So I think the book more so is about really sharing my experiences and how I fell in love with the game of basketball. My younger brother was a huge influence on that. But just the different coaches who've helped impact my journey as I've moved through, and then the experiences, being away from my son. Coaching is a profession where you don't just fill out an application and get a job around the corner. You got to go where the jobs are, and that can sometimes put a strain on your loved ones. So really talking about how that's impacted it, different things I've seen from, coaches being discriminated against, or just the whole gamut of what we experience over a coaching life.
Right. Yeah. Those things are important. And finally, I want to ask you about this doctorate you're working on. Tell me why you think it's necessary to have a doctorate. What have you learned, and has it helped you to do your job better? How far away are you from finishing also?
Well, I finish a class today. I start my next class Friday. I'm studying higher education leadership. It's a doctorate in education, the concentration in higher education leadership. And I think, Ty, for me, I've always been passionate about leadership. And when you add credentials like a doctorate, it gives you greater capacity to do more work. And I want to be able to have more influence and be able to impact more of the experiences of coaches, of student athletes, of what's going on in the current landscape of higher education, because now college athletics isn't just changing. Higher ed is changing. And I've been able to watch it from various lenses over the better part of the last 20 years. And I want to be able to do more to influence and help the people who are doing great work in this landscape of higher ed, of college athletics. And as it pertains directly to the experiences that student athletes are having. But I would also say I've always been a student of leadership, and wanting to learn as much as I can about it, and watching different types of leadership. And I watch college presidents, I watch athletic directors, and I watch coaches. I watch people who are tasked with moving other people. And what are the strengths that they have in doing that? What are the weaknesses and challenges that they have? How does the environment impact that? So I've always been very interested and passionate about learning about that. So my coursework has really been versed in learning more about that, and how maybe I can make an impact in not just my own growth and development, but helping to impact other leaders, this next generation.
Right. Now that's a program you started, I imagine, around the same time last year, May 2023, something like that. Maybe June, summer 2023.
Last summer. Yes, sir.
Hey, before we wrap, is there one thing that you've learned so far, read about, studied, researched, that has really stood out to you in the last year being in this doctorate program?
I think that leadership is changing the lens of how you see from challenges to opportunities. They say that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And it's really helped shift on how I view what could be perceived as obstacles, as opportunities to really expand my thought, to expand and ask for help, to reach out to different people, to get different levels of feedback, to get to the desired outcome. And it's really helped to really shift and expand my thought, and helping to get the people that I'm working with to also expand their lens for what we can achieve despite the perceived challenges, and looking at them as opportunities. So that's what I would say the greatest thing I've learned over this last year.
Yeah, widening of perspective. This has been a great conversation, Kyle, thinking about your journey in terms of the evolution of coaching and leading people, right? while it was in coaching, while it was in the peripheral things that you did while coaching, which leads you now to working in administration, still doing those peripheral things around coaching people, and then working on this doctorate so you can further expand the impact and opportunity for you to coach people and lead people. I think it's been excellent, Kyle. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership podcast.
Ty, I just want to say again, man, I commend you. I find it a high honor to be on this platform. I've seen and listened to many of the guests that you've had on, and they help craft my leadership journey. Right. So
excellent.
I just want to commend you on the work that you do in elevating the voices and experiences of many of the great leaders, not just in college athletics, but in higher education. I salute you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. That was Kyle Adams. Kyle is the Deputy Director of Athletics at Delaware State University. And of course, I am Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.